I stood at the funeral in a black dress that once made my husband's eyes light up, but that day, those same eyes looked through me like I was a stranger, and as my father-in-law's casket was slowly lowered into the cold earth beneath a sky heavy with rain, I felt something even colder inside me, like something had died long before this funeral began. Something in my marriage, something in the man who once promised to love me until death, but instead sat beside me like a polished stranger, his hand clenched tightly around a copy of the will that would change everything, and when we got home, still damp from the rain, he turned to me, his voice flat, his words cutting sharper than any blade, and said, "This is my house now, and I want you out by morning." And I laughed at first because I thought it was grief speaking, stress maybe, or even just confusion. But the way he looked at me made my knees shake and my world crumble because there was no love in his eyes. Only calculation. Only hunger. Only the shadows of greed dancing in a man who now owned $450 million and thought that meant he could buy back his soul, rebuild his image, erase me like I was just a scribble on a canvas he no longer needed. And so I packed in silence. Every dress, every memory, every echo of laughter we once shared. I packed it all into boxes that felt more like coffins, and I left that mansion knowing I had just been erased from the life I helped build brick by brick, smile by smile, and I stayed. With a friend that night, unable to sleep, unable to breathe, replaying it over and over again. The inheritance, the coldness, the eviction, the betrayal, until the pain blurred into rage, and the rage into resolve, and that next morning, when I woke up to a dozen missed calls and voicemails from him, each one more frantic than the last, I knew something had gone wrong, terribly wrong, and I pressed play with shaking fingers and heard his voice. Not arrogant this time, not smug, but panicked, desperate, almost broken as he said, "Please, please call me back. It's all gone. They're freezing everything. I don't know what to do. You're the only one who ever knew how to fix things." And I should have felt satisfaction, justice even, but all I felt was the deep ache of someone who still, somehow, loved the man who destroyed her, because what he didn't know was that his father never trusted him with that fortune, and that the night before the funeral, his father called me, not him, and told me he'd changed the trust documents, that the money would be locked unless my husband remained married and faithful to me for another year, because deep down his father saw what I had refused to see for years, that his son was not a man driven by family or love, but by ego, greed, and the chase of power, and that I was the last thread holding him to anything real, and now, by throwing me away, he had also thrown away every dollar of that $450 million, triggering a clause that froze every account, locked every property, halted every investment, and I sat there listening to his messages, tears running down my cheeks not out of pity, but out of grief for the love I had once believed was real, and I knew I had two choices: go back and help him rebuild under the illusion that love could return, or walk away and let him face the storm he created alone, and I chose silence. Because sometimes the loudest answer is no answer at all, and as the media swarmed the story, heir to fortune loses it all overnight, wife vanishes after inheritance meltdown, I stayed quiet, stayed away, watching from afar as he tried to spin the story, tried to paint me as the manipulator, the gold digger, the villain, but no amount of interviews or PR could erase the truth that was now stitched into every legal record. That he had it all and lost it all because he failed to see the value of the only person who ever stood beside him with no price tag attached, and months passed and he filed motions, appeals, even begged the trustees, but the condition remained. No reconciliation, no release, and every time he tried to call, I blocked a new number. Every time he sent a letter, I burned it without reading, not out of hatred, but because I had finally found peace in the silence, power in my absence, and I used that time to rebuild, to breathe, to remember who I was before his world swallowed mine. And I started writing again, painting again, speaking again in ways I hadn't since. Becoming his shadow, and I moved to a quiet town near the ocean where no one knew my name, where I could wear bare feet and sunlight like armor, and one day, a letter arrived from his father's attorney, and signed, but clearly intentional, a letter that simply read, "He thought money made him powerful. You gave him purpose. Now you are free to choose what power really means, and attached was a key, not to a vault or account, but to a small beach house paid for years ago, titled in my name only, a place his father had prepared in case I ever needed to start again, and I wept, not because of the gift, but because someone had seen me, really seen me, and prepared a way for me to live not as a wife or a trophy or an accessory to power, but as a person worthy of her own story, her own freedom, her own beginning, and now, every morning I wake up to the sound of waves, coffee in hand, wind in my hair, peace in my bones, and I smile. Not because he lost everything, but because I found myself, and if you've ever been discarded, silenced, replaced, betrayed, let this be a reminder that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply surviving beautifully, silently, and completely free, and sometimes losing what you thought was everything is the only way to discover what truly matters, because love should never be a transaction and trust should never be a test. And if someone only values you when it benefits them, let them go, because your value isn't measured in how much pain you can endure to keep someone else comfortable. It's measured in how fully you choose to live when the weight is finally lifted. So if you're standing in the ashes of something you thought would last forever, let this be your spark, your permission, your sign it's okay to rise. It's okay to walk away, and it's more than okay to never look back, because your life doesn't begin when someone chooses you. It begins when you choose yourself. And if this story touched your heart, if you've ever been underestimated, unappreciated, or quietly broken and still managed to carry on, then don't just scroll. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that sometimes walking away is not the end, but the start of the most powerful chapter yet.